then I found out and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, they're cute, you know? And then it was like, I kept learning more about them and I'm like, oh, wait, they're all over the world. And then it's like, oh, wait, they all are like really wild looking.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. It really does not take long for most divers to discover the wonderful, unique, and strange world of Nudis. Which one is your favorite? In this episode, I speak with Hannah, a diver from Edmonds, Washington, in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Hannah's goal is to make Nudis a household name, and I am more than happy to promote this cause. Why? Because who doesn't love Nudis? Diving in the Puget Sound, flooded housings, and the wonderful, unique, and strange world of Nudis. I hope you enjoy. Hannah, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. I was going to say, it's actually exciting because I just picked up my dry suit, so I am a little giddy.
What kind of dry suit? Which one did you get?
So I actually found we have a local dive shop that sells like secondhand stuff, and they just have so much inventory, but they're always going through old gear, and they moved right next to us, so we like going and seeing in there every once in a while. But I found this, I've been looking for dry suits for years, right? But I found this old like 2005 Mobi's that is just fits me perfect. So, and it's
awesome.
It's retro colors. It's neon orange on the inside, so I'm stoked.
No, that's awesome. I love like the retro colors, and I actually search out for like wetsuits in that color because, I mean, don't get me wrong, like the black, it's cool, it's black, you know, it's sleek, but
right, yeah.
I like to stand out sometimes. And Bear, I think it was last year, came out with a retro like throwback wetsuit from, I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's like blue and red, and it like looks something like out of a uniform out of a Star Trek episode or something, which is also great because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. But
nice, yeah.
Yeah, no, congratulations on the new dry suit. That's awesome. It's definitely a game changer, especially where you are. I'm sure that's got to be some tough wetsuit diving.
People think I'm a little crazy, or they're like, oh, you've only been diving for like a couple months or something, you know, when they see us in wetsuits, and we're like, no, sadly. But I just couldn't find what I liked, and I could never justify like dropping $5,000 for a custom made, you know, which is what a lot of people around here have, which is amazing, but I just could never get myself to do it. So when I finally saw that retro one that fit me, I was like, yes, I'm getting it.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, my first dry suit was used, and the second one I got was because I got an extremely good discount from the shop that I was working at. Because, they can be very expensive for sure, like, especially when you start getting into the custom ones. Yeah, no, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm pretty tall, so it's hard for me to find stuff that fits. So I would pretty much have to do custom, so... Yeah. But it is crazy. I mean, I posted like a video saying that I got a dry suit, and it was funny because I'm so like immersed in the cold water diving, and then a lot of people are like, what's a dry suit? Like, what? And they're like, oh, do you really need one? Like, how cold is the water? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's cold. Like,
speaking of the water and the cold, so the first question I usually like to ask is, tell me how and why you got into scuba diving. Tell me about that first breath, that first experience, what led you to that moment.
Oh, man, yeah. So my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but he's my husband now. So his father and uncle grew up, or they were diving in their 20s and 30s. And so my husband grew up around diving and thought it was really cool, and was just... You know, always, he's got baby pictures of him next to a scuba tank, like really cool stuff, but we just always kind of brushed it off. I don't know, his dad would just be like, you guys need to get in the water. Like, what are you doing? Like, we live in Puget Sound. It's beautiful. Like, I think he was like trying to motivate us, but not but also just like, how do I push you guys to do it? You know, so for years we kind of went back and forth about it, but I was like, it's cold, it's dark, you know. I kind of had like this fear of dark water, and so I was like, I just don't know if I would even enjoy it. Like, it kind of scared me thinking about it. And we were like 25, you know, just getting into the workforce and kind of getting bummed out by by the workforce and just the daily grind, you know, that you kind of grow up into. And then my husband called me one day and was like, I did it. I signed up. Like, if you want to do it with me, you can, but if not, like, I'm you know, I'm bored and I need something new to do, and I signed up. And so I was like, okay, like, you know what, I'm scared, but let's do it. So we signed up through a little dive shop here in Edmonds in Washington, and, you know, I was kind of hesitant the whole time, just trying to learn. It's kind of overwhelming the first couple days where you're just learning the gear, and then you're trying to learn, you know, dive tables and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh man, what are we getting ourselves into kind of a thing. And I was like, you know, everything's really expensive. Like, I hope we enjoy this and we don't just like waste this money. And then we got in the pool and they let us breathe. And I was like, this is it. I'm like, I'm never going back kind of a thing, awesome. You know? Yeah. And so I just never really, I think I was always scared of the dark water because I just didn't know what was there. It was always like the unknown that scared me. And then once I was like, oh, well, I have a mask on and I can see. And it's just like fish and, you know, pretty things. And so I'm like, oh, it's not scary down here. Like, the fish don't care about us, you know, like, yeah. So that was really cool and super fun. And then, I mean, that was just in the pool and I was like so stoked. And then we got to our first open water dives in Seattle, and it's dark and cold, and I was like, I don't care. This is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. And it starts, you know, it got kind of like overwhelming of being like, oh my gosh, I've been living my whole life just on land. And you're like, and I was so like, because you realize like the whole earth is water, you know, and there's so much that you can see and be exposed to that you never were before. So yeah, it was really cool.
I'm sure it could have been, or it was quite challenging, just because it's one thing learning when it's like the warm water environment. Like, it really does shed a lot of gear, less weight, less neoprene, no gloves. It's literally a whole different world. So I give props to people that learn in cold water environments, because not knowing, I can see how it could become very overwhelming very quickly. Like, you got these big thick gloves, you're trying to maneuver all the different things in your gear. Yeah, I could definitely see how it could be super overwhelming, but that's awesome that you just found the love for it.
It just took that, you know, that push. And I think, you know, I meet people that are like, I don't know where they, and I'm like, I know where you are. I was there, where you're kind of just like, like, I love the ocean and stuff, but it's just, I'm kind of scared. And I'm like, sometimes you just need to push, like, just do it. So, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the diving up there. I know the water is very cold. So, little fun fact about me. I actually lived in whatever you want to call it, Orcas Island for 2 summers.
Oh, no way.
Long time ago. And even in the summertime, people would be like, you know, don't jump in the water. I mean, you could jump in the water, but it's cold. You know, it's not like your typical beach that most people would think of. So I never really went swimming that much in the ocean because I just knew it was cold, and it was something that I never really got into. So tell me a little bit about the diving and what you can see, because I've heard beautiful things about the water over there, but I don't really know much about diving in the Puget Sound, though, to be honest.
No, it's a great question. So that's funny because I love diving off of Orcas, which is really cool. And I also think that is one of the constraints here with Puget Sound, why so many people don't get into diving is because of the cold. But I'm like, once you get the gear on, you don't even think about it. So the diving is, it is tough because we have bad visibility days, especially in the summer when the algae blooms are going and it's like you can barely see your gloves in front of you. And so I think people kind of associate diving with that and then just stop, right? They're like, oh, that must be what it's like. We just talked to some guy at a dive site and he's like, oh, well, I read in a magazine once that it was like pea soup when you couldn't see a foot. So why are you guys out there? We're like, okay, I don't think this many people would be doing it if it was like that all the time, and so it is tricky, but I think part of that makes it so good because when it is good, it's really amazing. And so, if you get a clear day, and we have like visibility reports are huge here. Since we're protected, we don't... In the Puget Sound, we don't really have to worry about wind as much. It kind of depends on the site. But we're not like California where all they care about is wind. Here, all we really care about is visibility. And so that's what we focus on. But if the vis is good, the cold water has so many nutrients and all the currents coming through that it's absolutely spectacular. And we get the biggest octopus in the world. We have huge white anemones everywhere that are just very striking in the water, especially when it's like a really green water day. It's just absolutely beautiful. Huge schools of fish. And so it's, I've never dove in Hawaii, not yet. I really want to, but I haven't been yet. But one of my best dive buddies has been there, and he's like, I would rather dive here because there's so much life, especially like per square inch. Like you look on a rock and it's just absolutely covered in life because we have so many animals and everything. And he's like, in Hawaii, it was kind of like, oh, every once in a while you see turtle, it's kind of cool. Or like if you go to reefs, it's kind of cool. But here it's like, we just go in our backyard and it's beautiful.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it definitely gets a bad rap because of the cold and the visibility. But I'm like, if you can take care of the cold, just put on a wetsuit, you'll be okay. And then just look out for, like, ask other divers, when we're walking around, like, oh, how's viz? And if people are like, oh, you got to get in, it's 40, 50 feet viz, you'll go down there and it's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that's awesome. When you say cold, what are the temperatures there?
So in the winter, it drops down to about 44 degrees, which I always try to look this up. I think that's 12.
Oh, I'm so bad with the Celsius Fahrenheit conversion.
It's 7 degrees Celsius. And then it gets up to like 52, so about 11.
Oh, okay. So those must be nice days then, huh?
Yeah. And it's kind of cool too because we have very distinct thermoclines.
Oh, okay.
That's also why there's one at 40 feet usually in most places, and then again at like 60. And so I usually love staying right at that 40 feet because it's like right above the the cold, and there's all the fish hang out there, so yeah. But it's, there's just really cool animal, like nudis. Like I had no idea what a nudie was until I started diving, and then most people associate them with like Indonesia and Australia, which they have really cool ones, but we have amazing ones here, so.
Well, no, that's awesome. That was actually going to be my next question. So do you remember the first moment? Like, I remember my introduction to nudis, and at first I was kind of just confused, like, what's all this hype about,
Right.
Everyone, I was in Indonesia, oddly enough, and everyone's like, oh, we're just looking for nudis, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I'm just this guy from Texas. I had no idea what they were, and yeah. I just remember, I don't remember like seeing my first one, but I remember just the love for them started growing as you start searching, because there's so many cool ones, and you're just like, they're just something that it's not like just this big thing that's floating by or swimming by. It's like, oh, you got to kind of search for them, and then it becomes a little game. And then when you start finding cool ones and pointing them out to your buddies, they're like, oh, check this out, check this out. And then you find, like the elusive ones. So tell me about how the passion for nudies started growing.
Yeah, the way you said it is perfect, and I think that is why so many people love them. And because it is funny, because the first time I do get messages all the time of being like, okay, like you're hyping these up a little much. And I'm like, I know, but it's totally a love that grows, which is funny because and that's kind of what happened to me. Like the first time I saw one was on my first open water dive.
Oh, awesome.
And so immediately I was just like, what is this glowing white thing? Like, it's absolutely stunning. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I have no idea what even kind of animal it is. And then I found out and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, they're cute, And then it was like, I kept learning more about them. And I'm like, oh, wait, they're all over the world. And then it's like, oh, wait, they all are like really wild looking, or like, oh, you can find ones. It's like, accentuates on itself, right? So you get more and more excited about it. And so I started, I kind of started small, like, oh, I just want to post nudies and, about our diving in the Puget Sound, just because I wanted to show people what we were seeing. And then I was like, oh, it'd be fun to show nudies that other people are taking, because they're finding really cool ones in this area. And so it's kind of snowballed. And then, I was like, oh, we'll see how long this goes. Like, I'll probably get sick of nudies after a year, or something. And then I'm like, and now I'm like even more excited about it than I was then, which is funny because it's like the more I learn about them and the more I like read about them and see different ones and like read research that people are doing on them, I'm like, they're even cooler now. And I do think they get, people that don't love them give them a bad rap. People that love them are like, they know why.
Oh yeah, it's and I feel like the people that are not unsure. Or, I'm not trying to classify a whole group of people, but like people that don't love them or that don't, it's because it's like, have you really seen them or do you really know? Because they are really cool. And especially once you start seeing a bunch of different ones. And yeah, it's definitely like, I don't know how people can't not like them because they're such unique little creatures. And it's such a fun thing. I remember when that time that I got, first introduced to nudies, it was at a marine conservation group. I was volunteering, and we would do these science dives, right? And they're like, oh, we're going to go search for nudies. And literally that's like every fun dive you ever go on is like you're just searching for nudies. It's like, oh, yeah, let's go see it. And then you start pointing them out, and it just becomes a super fun thing. How many types of nudies is there in the Pacific Northwest, or Puget Sound, I should say?
In the Puget Sound? Oh, that's a good question. I would say that we probably have like 100. We don't have that many that I would say off the top of my head, and then we obviously have the ones that we see all the time, like the very common ones. And then we have ones that are less common. So yeah, I would say that compared to a lot of places, we don't have that many. But the cool thing is that some of them, I guess a lot of them, they will change colors and stuff depending on what they eat. They also will change sizes. So it's like you could see the same one over and over, but it's always going to be different, which is what makes it super fun. So you never get sick of them. But yeah, I think the nudie haters, I guess we can call them the nudie haters. I think they're just like, oh, everyone overhypes them because it's just a slug, and I'm like, but I'm like, that just means that you swim. You're like, look at it, swim past it, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Done. Okay, what's the hype? I'm like, the fun stuff though is when you start being like, okay, I want to see this one. How now I got to go find it, right? Yeah. Like that's when it gets fun. Instead of being like, oh, I hope I see a shark today. It's like, no, it's like, oh, I'm going to go look for this food. I'm going to go look at this time of day. It's super fun. It's a scavenger hunt. So I think that's also why people get super into them. Oh,
yeah. It becomes a little expedition in sorts or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But no, that's awesome. So tell me some fun facts about nudies.
Oh man, there's tons. Well, I was going to say that's really cool that you studied in Indonesia, because that's like my number one nudie bucket list, I guess, because they have so many.
Oh, and you know what's kind of a little bit of a bummer was so I'm still continuing my journey, so when I start to see new ones, it's always really awesome. But I was so new to the whole nudie world that I saw so many cool ones, but it didn't really like stick with me, because I'm like, oh, that just looks really cool. But it wasn't like, it might have been months later where like you actually saw one of those, that one,
Oh,
like the
right.
I'm horrible with the names, but I know a lot of people call them, do they call them the Pikachu nudie? Like,
Oh,
it just
yeah.
looks like a little Pikachu. And I've seen one, and because I even have a picture that someone gave me, and it's like, oh, that's the one that everyone searches for, or one of the ones that everyone searches for. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, oh, that looks really cool. But, like, if I would have known now, I'd be like, you know, just all in his face, like, oh my God, look at you, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so
That's cool.
It's nice when I get to see them now, because I can appreciate them more for who they are and what they are.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to like teach people and get people excited about them too, is because I'm like, you know, especially if you're divers, like there's a lot to look at and a lot to get into, and I'm like, but it's fun to like make it a scavenger hunt and learn more about them, and it's, I mean, there's weird stuff going on right now with them, especially with the waters warming up and stuff, that they're starting to move areas, and so some of the nudies that we used to only see in California, we're starting to see them now up here in the Puget Sound, and so now there's just like all these changes going on where I think citizen scientists and just like recreational divers have a lot of knowledge that most people don't think about. Like, oh, well, I saw one of those on Tuesday, you know, and it's like, well, you need to tell someone, you know, and so I think that stuff is really cool and also very important too, because we're in the water, we can be the eyes and for people.
Yeah, no, for sure. So is that how you started the I Love Nudies? Like, how did that all start to try to get the message out there?
Yeah, so it started back when I first started diving, because I just wanted to show people what the Puget Sound was like, since I was coming from a place of not having no idea. And then I was like, well, I want more people to know. And so I was like, I just want to teach people and show them, you know, that diving can be really cool and fun in the Puget Sound. And mostly, you know, I'm trying to get, what my purpose was then and still is now, was to try and get people in the water, especially because before, when I was like, I took a ton of biology classes in college, and I even took a bunch of ocean classes, but it was still always so distant to me, you know, when you would hear about the issues going on, and, you know, you're just like, okay, that really sucks that there's all this plastic in the ocean, you know, but it kind of felt like it was a different world though, because I was so removed from it.
Yeah.
And so, but once I started diving, it was like, oh, this is now my playground. This is now my home. You know, like, I need to freaking protect this place, and it's changing, and people are screwing it up. And kind of like, you become a bigger advocate for things, I think, when you love them than versus being scared of them. And so that is definitely still one of my biggest pushes, is just trying to get divers, because if you are diving, you love the ocean, you're going to take care of it. And so the more people that we can have a connection with nudies and with the ocean, the better we'll be off. So that's kind of like the ground, you know, the base of everything that I do, is just trying to get people in the water. And one of those things, like, a lot of people that follow me and that I meet in person are tide poolers, which is kind of like the perfect demographic for me, because I'm like, you're right before the step, right? I'm like, all you have to do is take that breath underwater and you're gonna love it. And so I'm just trying to kind of give them that push.
That's awesome. Well, tell me about like some of the events and the contests that you hold.
I guess let's start with my pop-up. So there's this underwater park here in my hometown, or not hometown, but where I live now. It's called the Edmonds Underwater Park, and it's one of the best parks in the United States. It's been protected since the 70s, and so it is, what Puget Sound untouched would pretty much look like. And so it's incredible. I mean, the fish there's fish that are bigger than me.
Oh, wow.
They've sunk in all of these boats and donations from the state that they'll give old equipment and then they'll sink them. There's actually a group of volunteers that work on it almost every day. They're at least there weekly working on it. They put up a bunch of ropes, and for navigation, a lot of students learn how to dive there because the deepest it gets is 30 feet, which is perfect, right? And as long as the visibility is good, it's going to be a good dive because there's just so much to see and so much life. So it's really cool. And so I wanted to start, because I started partnering with artists and making my own merchandise for trying to teach people about Nudis and just get them hyped up. And I was like, well, I want to start doing like a farmer's market kind of a style, but I feel like if I went to just a regular farmer's market, people would be very confused. I might be able to do it now that I'm more comfortable, but at the time I was like, divers are my demographic, like that. I just need to go to them, right?
Yeah.
And so I started the process of talking to the city and doing like a whole government proposal for getting a license where I could sell at that park, which took a long time and it took a lot of work, but it was totally worth it because now I am like the only vendor there, right? Which is nice compared to a farmer's market. And then people are always just like, oh, what's going on? Because, you're a vendor here and we don't usually have them here. And then I like teach people about the park, and then segue that into like, this is what Nudis are. And for like, we live on the ocean and almost everyone I talk to is like, a what? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this is insane. Like, no one knows what these are except for, I guess, nerds. I don't know. I'm like,
a lot of divers do.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you have to be a diver or a tide pooler, but like common people don't know. And so I'm like really trying to show them like what cool creatures we have just right here. So that was super exciting. I do that once a month. I've been doing that since last October. And so it's been super fun. I've had lots of people actually drive up to like come see me, which is really cool. And then this one on Saturday that I'm doing this week is the first time, but I'm actually going to do like a little presentation where I have like a little handout, and then I'm going to teach people about nudibranchs that you can find in Washington, and then like how I find them and the tools I use. So it's going to be pretty short, but it's kind of my first like public, face-to-face teaching, which I'm really excited about. So
okay. Are you nervous at all, or I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of nerves.
Yeah, there's always nerves.
Yeah.
But I am more comfortable, and I've made friends with some of the like park rangers, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna come see your presentation," So then I'm like, "Oh man," like I'm a little nervous, but I'm like, I just gotta do it. I'm comfortable now that I've been doing it once a month for a little bit. I am much more comfortable than I was that first month. But I'm like, I mean, that's how you get good at anything, right? You just kind of have to throw yourself into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I finally decided, because I have, I'm pretty busy, but I've always wanted to do a photo contest, and I've always thought that would be super fun, obviously, because it's, why Nudis are so fun is because they're so photogenic, right? And we're always trying to find the coolest one and who can get the best shot and everything, and so that's always kind of been in the back of my mind, too, for years of like, okay, one of these, I gotta do a photo contest. And so I finally sat down and organized it, and it's going on right now, and it's my nudie egg contest, which is super fun because I didn't just want to do like a generic one, I wanted to make it unique and something that people would have to get in the water to try and go find, like, oh, okay, I don't really have any photos of that, so I gotta go do it, and I've gotten so many good ones so far, so it's been a lot of fun. I thought it was just going to be a smaller photo contest, just Instagram kind of a thing. And then I started getting like hundreds of photos. And I'm like, some of these are so good. I'm like, how? And obviously I like the majority of them because I'm biased. And I know the people that are submitting. So I'm like, oh, she's got to win because, I've watched her go from a GoPro to now she's got a full kit. So I'm like, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, okay, I can't just pick a winner. Like, there's no way. And so I was like, okay, I could either have people vote, And then someone messaged me and was like, oh, you should just have judges. And I was like, oh, that's... yeah, duh. Why? I was like, that's what most photo contests do, huh? And so I was like, oh man, okay, well, who am I going to get to judge? And so I was just like, you know what, I'm going to send out my message to some of my favorite photographers. Like, there's probably no way they're ever going to respond, because I'm just like... no one. And then almost all of them responded, and I was like dying. So we have like Alex Mustard, who's like one of the best underwater photographers in the world, and he's one of the judges. And we've got Annie Crawley. She's a huge diver. I mean, I have 9 judges, and all of them are incredible. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's... yeah, it's a dream of mine to do it, to run it, and so we're right in the middle of it. So if you're listening, I hope that you will, submit some photos. You just have to tag me, and we've got some good ones, though, so the competition's high.
And the photos are coming in from all over, I'm assuming, too.
Yes, yeah, that's also awesome. The really cool part. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's super cool. What do you use to shoot nudies? Because, I mean, obviously, I've... and if you know a trick, please let me know. But as far as like a GoPro, it's almost impossible on a GoPro. So I literally, the funniest thing is the biggest reason why I've ever thought of getting a better camera setup is just so I could get like macro nudies, things like that.
Oh, I know.
The smaller stuff. And because I've tried so many different ways with a GoPro, and you think it's all cool, and then you get back home and you're like, I can't see anything. It's just
I know. You're like, dang it. Yeah, I know. And yeah, that is what the frustrating part, because GoPros are so good at wide angle. You're like, why are you so bad? Like, you would make everyone's life. I know. So one of the things I did get, which I do recommend for beginners, is Backscatter. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a big photography company, underwater photography, but they make a macro lens for GoPros.
Oh, okay.
That was definitely helpful for me. It still isn't like professional great, but it is definitely a good step forward. Yeah. And it's a wet lens, so you can just like flip it forward. So it's great.
Oh,
and
okay.
I loved that. I shot on that for a while. But I got to the point where I was like, I do want to do this professionally and like do this big time. And so I did end up getting a DSLR Canon with an Ike-Light, the whole spiel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was incredible. And I loved it for about a year, and I loved it. And then I was on a dive. It was one of those dives where, looking back, you're just like, you know what? I could have prevented this, but I even have like a pump to make sure that my housing is locked and everything. But we were just like rushed, I just got off work. We're rushed trying to get out the door. I just threw my camera together. And I'm like, it'll be fine. I've dove this 100 times, like it'll be fine. And then it was a deep dive at this dive site, Mukilteo. And I had this idea in my head, actually, which is funny. I really wanted to get like a pretty wide angle shot of the structure and then divers like going through the structure. And in order to do that, I bought like a little tripod, and I was going to set the camera and then like have the lights and then have all of us like swim in the view, right? And then it was just going to be like taking 1,000 shots, right? And so like we all knew that, like there was 3 of us going in. It was like, okay, this is the game plan, we're going to go down. And then we go down, and my buddies are like looking at me, and I'm just looking at them, and and they're like, what? And I just set the camera in the like gravel and then just like swam away. And they were like, what the heck? Like, what's going on? And when I was setting it down to get it set up, I just see the water level just like going up. And I was just like, God. And we're at like 75 feet, right? So it's like, I'm not going to balloon to the top to save my camera, right? That's like the number one thing you learn is your life over your camera gear. And I was like, and it's already flooded. So it's like, I just need to try and enjoy this dive and and it was negatively buoyant so that it would sink, right? So I just set it there and then then that happened. It was a blow. It really sucked. I did have insurance though, so I would definitely, especially if you get all of that gear, I would get insurance. And so I had to file a claim and it took a while, but it was definitely worth it. So I didn't like completely lose all my money, which is good. But it kind of like, I was just like, oh man, that was such a low.
Yeah, that's...
and so now one of the limitations with that was that I only had a wide angle lens. Like it took great macro photos and I loved doing it, but it wasn't like... It bothered me that I would have to get out of the water, change the lens, get back in the water, which is what professionals do. And so I was accepting of that. And then I got pregnant and had a kid. And so it was kind of like, all right, that's done, right? The big camera's done. And so then once I got back in, I actually bought a TG6, which is just a point and shoot, and it solved my problem of being able to shoot wide angle but then also wanting to get the good nudie shots. And as long as you have good lights, I have been super happy with it actually. And so that's kind of like, it's a powerhouse.
I completely agree. And I've seen, I think it might have been 2 versions ago, or I can't remember the name. It might have been the 5, or I don't know if they made a 4. I can't remember. But this was like a few years ago, and that's when I became aware of those cameras. And honestly, that's kind of, I think, where I would gravitate towards, just because it's not this big, huge setup. Because I don't think I could do the professional route. Like, a few different reasons. It's a lot of gear. I mean, you see these professional photographers and they're bringing all this gear around. It's like a whole nother bag on top of your dive kit and everything. And then just to mention the money that goes into it, I am envious and like people that do it. I'm like, man, that's so awesome. Like I couldn't personally do it, but you're doing some really cool stuff. But the TG, because they're from Olympus, correct? Yeah. Yeah. No, I've seen those cameras and I'm like, man, this is something that it's small and light enough to where you can travel, you can bring it on a dive. It's not just the super invasive thing. And I definitely, I feel like that's the camera eventually I'll gravitate, because I have a little, it's not a GoPro, it's a DJI, one of those, basically like a GoPro, but it's just a different version, and I'm super happy with it, because I'm that guy. I'm that guy. I literally I'll get all this footage, I'll be like, I'll bring this camera out, I'll film everything, and then when I get back home, I'm just horrible at editing, so it just kind of sits on my computer, and then like as time passes, I'm like, I'll get to it, and it's like, 3 months later, and I'm just like, I'm like, why do I even bring it? So, but it is nice to have. It is nice to have. Do you have the underwater housing for your camera too? Because I know those are good for... I know they're waterproof up to like maybe 30, 40 feet, and then after that they're not there.
And so I tell people like tide poolers and stuff. I'm like, a TG6 would be awesome for you guys. Like that would be incredible. But then for divers, you definitely want to get the housing. And so it's still not cheap. It comes out, especially because to make it perform, you also definitely have to have lights. I had a buddy that he had the same camera, but it's like, I have huge video lights, and he's like, why isn't mine not turning out? And so then he finally figured out his lights, and now he's getting incredible photos, right? It's all about light. And so it still ends up being pretty expensive, but I'm I love it though. I tell everyone that it's the camera to go. As long as you don't want to be the full-blown professional lugging a 40-pound camera. My husband used to carry it for me, just like, Yeah, but I love the TG6 because, yeah, it's smaller. I can just clip it off on me, and it takes incredible photos. And, the wide angle is definitely not as profound as my Canon was, which is a bummer, but the macro stuff is absolutely incredible. And so now I'm like, well, I'm only taking nudie photos anyway, so, it doesn't matter. It's super fun.
Do you have a favorite nudie, or is there too many to choose from?
Oh man, I know. This is the question that I always get asked. I always have to go back. I really love the blue dragons and stuff that are in Australia, and I love the Pikachu ones, and pretty much any nudie that is in South Africa. They are all incredible because they're wild looking. But my favorite for sure is the first one I ever saw, which is a white line Dorona that we have here in the Puget Sound, which is funny because they're not super colorful like most nudies are. They're just white. But because they're white, they absolutely glow. And they have all this pointed serrata on them. So then when the current is going, they flow. So they're just beautiful. So yeah, they're definitely my favorite. I probably post them once a month, maybe on my account, but I would post them every week if I didn't have self-control, because I get so many good photos of them. But yeah, what's your favorite?
Well, I am horrible at names. I'm horrible at. I need to become a lot better. The one, there's just so many. I don't know the exact names, so I don't want to sound. I don't want to sound dumb, I should say. But is it a Fabelina? Is that what they're called? Or
Flavolina.
Okay.
That's a whole family, I guess you could say. Okay. But yeah, there's a bunch of different ones. I'm trying to think of. I'm just looking it up really quick because there's one in Indonesia that is really cool.
There's definitely it becomes. I'm horrible when it comes to especially the scientific names. I literally the biggest reason why I know the Pikachu is just because I've heard it so many times, and then everybody knows. I feel like everybody at this point in the world knows what a Pikachu is. And so I've just heard it so many different times to where I'm like, oh, that's cool. And to be honest, if I didn't have the picture, I really wouldn't even remember seeing it. That's how bad it was because I was so unaware of how cool this thing I was looking at. And so, but the next time I see it, I'll be like, okay, I know now.
I was gonna say, I hope you pay attention for sure.
Oh, I do now.
And the scientific names are hard, and the scientific names and the common names are hard, especially because they're changing them constantly. So I'm really? All the time. I mean, and so I'm like, whenever people are like, oh, I don't know the name, I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to, we're not,
I just have the memory.
You.
Yeah, I just have the memory. Yeah. Oh, it kind of looked like this. What's funny, though, is... So that is kind of such a cool thing to see when the current is strong, and then you can kind of just see them just hanging out in the current, and they're just not getting blown back, but you're like, man, that's a tough little guy right there.
Yeah, I know, hanging on for dear life.
So my next question was going to be, and I think you kind of answered it already. Out of everywhere, where would you like to travel to go see nudies? But I think you kind of answered it already, so.
It would definitely be Indonesia for sure, and South Africa. But there's also I love the really obscure ones, right? And so there's really cool ones in Scotland, and my family is from Scotland, and so I'm like, oh, well, obviously I gotta go see the nudies from where, and so I also like the cold water, weird diving, I had a follower send me a nudie that he found in Antarctica, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the whole world, right? That is so cool. And so those are my bucket list places, is the not normal, Norway, Antarctica. I'm like, how do I get into the Arctic Circle to see some nudies? So,
well, you got the dry suit now, so definitely.
I know.
Yeah. No, and oddly enough, it's, because I was saying earlier I lived in the Pacific Northwest. I think the last time I was back there was like 2019, and it was just for a really quick trip. And we took we tried to take a train from LA up to Seattle, but it was in the middle of February, so the train never made it out of California. We got stuck. It snowed. Yeah, it's supposed to be like the most scenic route going up like the one. It was super beautiful. Until we got stuck, but we ended up having to like make our way back and then fly to Seattle. That's a story for another day. Amazing trip, a lot of fun stories. But no, a goal of mine since I started diving and started kind of getting into cold water is to make it to the Pacific Northwest and dive. I've actually heard even more so from you telling me, but just the diving there is absolutely beautiful, just some of the best. Some people the people that have been there and done it rave and rant about it, and it's on my list of places to go for sure. Just Vancouver, the Pacific Northwest in general, and it'd be really cool to go back to where I spent 2 summers as quote unquote not a kid but I guess young adult, and go back and reminisce a little bit, but then actually get in the water and see a whole different side of things that I didn't know was there when I was living there.
I know, you were so close to it. You were so close.
Dude. And it's funny too because I just had no idea. I mean, obviously I knew of scuba diving, but I was not a diver. So I appreciate you coming onto the podcast, and I guess I just say, is there any last final message you'd like to put out there? I'll put links in the description and tag everything that I can, but any final thoughts before we close out?
I would love, if you're not following me, please do. One of the things, definitely submit your photos for the photo contest, but one of the things I've been working on is doing like educational videos, and I've kind of done some diet ones and predators and age and where to find them, but I'm running out of ideas, so that is also one thing that I'm asking people, like what else could I research and do videos on, because I would love to do more. And I know so much, and so I kind of like forget, like, normal people aren't reading textbooks about nudis. So I'm like, what would you guys, what would all of you be interested in learning about? But yeah, and if you're if you're taking cool nudie photos, if you're in a really cool spot in the world anywhere, I want to see the nudies that are there. So.
That is great, and I am happy to try to get the message out there. So I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast. I do apologize, the photo contest is over, but you can always use hashtag #NudiePics and share your photo with Hannah. More contests in the future, so stay tuned and give her a follow.